Hey guys, in this segment I'm going to show you how I created my prototype level for my gDevelop Big Game Jam number 5 submission. Well, most of it anyway. I've extracted only the most productive sections. Along the way I fixed a lot of unexpected bugs, but still managed to create a pretty cool foundational level. Game jams are fun and a great opportunity to try some new features or capabilities that you've never tried with the pressure of a deadline. For this event, I set out with a goal to create a camera pan to show the player the entire challenge before they ever press a button. I embraced and pushed the limits of the hang feature while exploring many options to create an unstable platform for the unstable climb. With this, you can join me in rebuilding the proof of concept level for Unstable Climb, the search for rare gem clusters. Let's get started. Let's start by adding a background image. Click on Add a New Object, select Sprite, rename the sprite as Background. Click on Import Images to bring in the image from our asset pack. Navigate to where the image is saved and double-click to bring it into our project. Now we can drag the background into our scene. Let's add a new layer called Background and drag it below the base layer. Now let's click on the background again and change the layer in the object properties. Now I'm just going to resize the background image so that I can see more of the mountains in my scene. That looks good, so I'm going to start bringing in some platform objects. Click on Add a New Object, Sprite. I'm going to use Sprite and not Tiled Sprite for all of the platforms because I won't need to resize those. I'm going to try to be consistent with my naming, so I want to precede each of the platforms with the word platform, followed by the number used in the asset pack in case I need to find and make any modifications later. Click on Import Image and navigate to the Tiles directory. I'm going to quickly change my view to see which assets I'm bringing in, making it a little bit easier. Let's go ahead and select Tile 1 and click OK to bring that into the project. Click on the Behaviors tab and let's just add the platform behavior to each platform as we go. I don't want to accidentally forget and introduce a bug that I'll have to fix later. Be sure that the option to grab the edges is selected and then click Apply. Let's click on Add a New Object and we'll bring in Tile 2. And this one is a middle section which we may want to resize, so in this case we want to click on Tiled Sprite. Let's go ahead and change that name to Platform 2, and the tile size was 128, so I'll set that for the width and the height. Now let's choose the file and select Tile 2 and then OK to bring that in. Click on the Behaviors tab and let's go ahead and add that platform behavior and then click Apply. I'll show one more example, so let's bring in our snowman. For this one, we want to make sure that we use Sprite and not Tiled Sprite. We're going to do that for all of the static objects. Our snowman is in the Objects directory, so I'm going to precede this one with obj for objects and then the name of the individual object. In this case is going to be snowman. Our objects won't need any behaviors, so we can just click Apply. With these 3 examples, I'm going to go ahead and bring in the rest of my objects, pause the video, and do the same. I'll meet you back here in a second. With all of our game objects imported, let's go ahead and start building our scene. I'm going to look for platform or tile number 14, which is going to be the left side of a platform tile. I'm going to drag that into my scene and see what that looks like. We could always change it later if we need to. I don't feel like I need the middle section for this. This is going to be where my player is going to start. Next, look for platform tile number 16, and that's going to be the right-hand side. Drag that in so it lines up with our tile 14. You do want to make sure that the Y values of these 2 tiles match. It'll give our player a flat surface and make our scene look a little nicer. Next, let's look for the water top object and drag that into our scene. This should have been a tileable asset, so we can just stretch this across our scene and see what that looks like. Once we have that in a position where we like it, we're going to bring in the water bottom and stretch that down pretty far. We want to make sure that if our player jumps into the water, we can have a kill zone, but that's not going to be immediate, so make sure that you leave room for your player to float down a little bit. Now we have a place for our player to stand, but no player, so let's go ahead and add a new object to our scene. Rename this to player and click on Import Images. Navigate to where you save the player assets. And then we're going to highlight all of the idle images and click Open to bring them all in at once. We're going to rename this animation to idle. Let's make sure that we tick this loop because when they're standing there, we do want that animation to repeat seamlessly. Next, let's head over to the Behaviors tab, and we do want to add the Platform Object Behavior. Tick the Can Grab Ledges option and leave the rest as default so we can click OK, and now let's drag our player into the scene. First thing that we see is that our player is huge, way out of proportion for our other game assets. I'm going to bring our player in later as an event, so for now I'm just going to grab these handles and kind of get an idea of what size I want to use for my player. What you want to do if you plan to leave your player in the scene is use the manual option. Once you know roughly what size you want your player, the little lock icon that you see here between the width and height will make sure that your asset maintains aspect ratio. This will make sure that your player is not distorted by accidentally grabbing the wrong handle when you're resizing. Okay, that looks good, and I've made a note of my width and height that I plan to use for the event later. So let's go ahead and bring in the rest of the animations. We can double click on the player, click add a new animation, click on a sprite, and then we want to select all of the jump animations. Click open and then OK to bring those in. We do not need to have this one loop, so we can leave that empty. I'm going to go ahead and bring in the rest, pause the video and do the same. We can resume here when you're ready. Once you have all of your animations added, go ahead and click apply, which will take us back to our main scene. Now we're going to start building our mountain. Let's navigate to find the wall or tile number 4. Let's start the tile in the water, and then we're going to bring this up quite a bit. Don't worry if you extend past the game view because we'll set up the camera so that it follows the player. And since it is a mountain, I do want to make it pretty high. Once you have the left side where you like it, let's go ahead and find wall or tile 6. And then we're going to set this one so that it matches the left side. Now we'll need the centerpiece, which is the wall tile 5. We're just going to fill in the entire midsection with wall tile 5. Next, I'll need a platform or a ledge for the player to grab onto, and the premise of my game is unstable climb, so this is the piece that's going to be unstable, making it more difficult for the player to climb up the mountain. So for this, I want the ledge to stand out from the mountain, not to be confused with the platforms that allow the player to catch their breath. For this, I went ahead and downloaded Gems asset pack. I'll include a link for the assets in the description below. Before we can add the gems to gDevelop, they've been packaged in one sheet, so I'll want to extract one of those gems from the gem pack. For this, I'm going to go ahead and use GIMP. If you're not familiar, GIMP is a free open source image manipulation program. I'll include a link for the download in the description below, but really you can use any program that you like. Open the Gems PNG. Let's quickly zoom in by hitting 3 on the keyboard, or you can use this drop down here. Select the crop tool from the toolbox. Find the gem that you want to isolate, and then just left click and hold until you see 64 by 64. If you don't quite make it to 64 by 64, you can release the mouse and then make minor adjustments later by moving the individual sides. Notice that I missed the pixel in the far corner, so I'm just going to adjust that real quick and then make sure that I am indeed 64 by 64. Once you're happy with your crop selection, go ahead and click Enter, and that'll complete that crop. Now what we can do is right-click on the layer, select Layer to Image Size, and that's going to quickly get rid of all of that excess space. Once that's done, you can go up to File, Export As, navigate to your project directory, rename the file to gem.png. Now let's go ahead and click Export. The second box is going to pop up. We're going to leave everything as default and click Export again. Back in gDevelop, let's click New Object, Sprite, Import Image. Now let's go ahead and navigate to that gem that we just extracted. Let's go to the Behaviors tab, add the Platform Behavior, and make sure that Ledges Can Be Grabbed is ticked, and go ahead and click Apply. And we're going to go ahead and drag that into our scene and then get a sense of how high our player can jump. Let's go back into our gem and create a second animation. Double click on that gem to open the properties. Rename the first animation to Gem. Now let's click on Add an Animation. This will be used for our unstable gem. So let's go ahead and rename this one to Unstable Gem. Click on Add a Sprite, select your gem again, and then OK to bring that in. Now let's go ahead and click on Edit with Pascal. In my sandbox testing version, I had played around with a lot of options from tween to shake object extensions, and they didn't give me the look that I was going for. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a unstable animation using Pascal. So even with GIMP, if the object is rotated, it reduces the overall quality. So I'm not going to rotate it here. That's going to be something I'll have to go back and test after the gem submission deadline. For now, I'm just going to copy the layer 2 times. And now let's go ahead and select the hand tool. And for frame 2, I'm just going to move this entire gem to the lower left corner. As you can see, it's already starting to give us a little bit of an animation. So I'm going to copy frame 3 again and then leave that one so it comes back to center each time. And then for frame 4, I'm going to move the entire gem to the lower right corner. And that's pretty much going to do it for this unstable animation. Go ahead and click Save. Now make sure that the loop option is selected and then click Apply. Now let's show the grid mask, which will make it easier to space out the gems based on how far our player can jump. I'm just going to go ahead and line up this first one and then quickly play test to make sure that my player can still reach it, and it looks good. Now let's go ahead and duplicate by pressing Ctrl and D, and then we're going to place the second gem. Now I want to add some platforms, and these are going to be areas where the player can rest without fear of the ground dropping out from beneath them. I may actually add some caves for our player to explore along the way to the summit, but I'm running out of time, so I'll have to come back to that. Let's do a quick play test to be sure that everything is working, and the player seems to be good. Okay, I'm going to have to set a quick event to have the camera follow the player as I continue to build and play test. I'll need to be able to see what I'm doing. So let's head over to the Events tab, click on Add an Event, Add an Action, type Center Camera, and that'll get us close enough. And now we can choose Center the camera on the object, and the object in this case is going to be our player. Leave everything else as default, and then click OK. Let's head back to the Scene tab, and we're going to add a top to our mountain here. Search for Platform or Tile 1. Leaving the grid mask on, we'll probably do that throughout the duration. It's going to make it easier to snap everything in place. So let's go ahead and drag up our lower portion to meet the top portion, and we'll do that all the way across. Now let's look for Platform or Tile 3, and we're going to use that to add the right side. Now let's go ahead and fill in the middle section with Platform or Tile 2. Let's go ahead and set all of the edges of our mountain to Z order 2 and set the center to Z order 1. Quick play test to make sure everything works. And okay, it looks like our player can't reach the top, so we're going to add another gem. Press Ctrl D to duplicate, and let's go ahead and move that gem up. Remember the spacing to be sure that our player can reach it, and then another quick play test. Okay, good. It looks like our player can reach the top of the mountain now, which is perfect. I do see some weird tearing in the mountain art, so I'm going to go ahead and troubleshoot this for a second. Bear with me. So you can see here I'm trying everything from changing the background color to resizing the art and making sure that everything's snapped to the grid mask. This is a very unusual issue. And finally, after moving the top portion of the mountain up so that there's no overlap or touching to other tiles, I can finally see a tiny space in the mid and right side of my mountain art. Very weird because I had snapped it to the grid more than once. But for some reason it was only when there was no overlay or touching of other tiles that I was able to see the actual problem. Now let's go ahead and build a second mountain behind the first, and this one's obviously going to go higher. So locate wall or tile 4, and then we're going to set that slightly above the first mountain and to the right. Once you have it where you want it and it looks good, let's go ahead and extend it down to hide it behind that first mountain with a little bit of overlay. Now we can go ahead and extend it up and then top it off with Platform or Tile 1. To extend the bottom, we're going to want to use the bottom edge or Tile 9. And this is a middle tile because we don't need the bottom left corner. So middle tile, let's just stretch that over to the right. And now once you have that as far as you want to go, then we can use the bottom edge or Tile 13, which is that corner tile. To complete the right side, we're going to go ahead and use wall or tile 6 and just extend that up so that it's even with the left side. And now we can go ahead and top that off with platform or tile 2. Fill in the center with wall or tile 5, and now just top off the mountain with platform or tile 2, and then just stretch that across. I'm going to go ahead and set the Z order of all of the outer edges to Z order 2, and then make sure that that center is Z order 1. Now we can place some gems around. Press Ctrl D to duplicate a gem, and then just place them around the top mountain portion. Do a quick play test. Okay, so we'll need to adjust a couple of gems, and then let's make sure that we add a new landing for our player to rest. So using tile 14 and 16. Another quick play test, and notice the tiny line at the bottom edge of the second mountain. To fix this, let's go ahead and just drag that bottom edge up a tiny bit. Sometimes this happens with assets or sprite sheets, and it's handy to know how to fix these issues when it happens. So sometimes you can do it just by resizing. Sometimes you have to take it into GIMP and make your adjustments there. In this case, it was nice and easy. Let's go ahead and make a danger zone or a kill zone for our level. Click on Add a New Object, Sprite. Let's go ahead and rename this. And to make it easier later for grouping my objects, I'm going to precede each of these with the word hide. So go ahead and type hide and then type danger and kill zone. You don't need both words, but I wanted to include both in case you like one or the other. Let's go ahead and click on Create with Pascal. Select the color that you want your sprite. I like to use red, but you can use any color that you like. Select the bucket fill tool and go ahead and fill that in. Let's go ahead and rename this sprite to match our object. And had I thought ahead, I would have done a copy paste to get it in the clipboard, but I forgot, so I'm going to type it out. Go ahead and click Save on that, and we won't need any behaviors, so go ahead and click Apply. Now let's zoom out so we can see the whole water area, and then drag the Danger Zone object into our scene and stretch it across. This is going to be used for times when the player misses a jump and lands in the water, for instance. I like to do 2 levels of danger, and the first is going to be to trigger the animation, and the second will be to fade out the sprite and reset the level. Let's go ahead and click on Add a New Object again, select the sprite, rename, and this time we're going to use Hide Player Start. This is going to be where the player will reset each time. This time I'm going to remember to highlight and copy the name into the clipboard since I know I'm going to reuse it. Let's go ahead and click on Create with Pascal. Choose any color that you like. Choose the bucket fill tool and then go ahead and fill that in. This time, because I remembered to plan ahead, just go ahead and click that name and then paste that in. Click Save and now click Apply. If you hid your layers in groups and or didn't show them by default, just go ahead and select them from the top and now you'll be able to see them in the sidebar. I want to add a scene group and call it hide. Double click on the new hide group and let's go ahead and add all of our hide objects. And this is where we planned ahead, and it's nice and easy because all we have to do is start typing the word hide. I want to make sure that I have the Z order on the hide object set to at least 2 so I can easily see my player. Now let's head over to the Events tab, add a new event, add a condition, find our danger zone, start typing the word collision, and then once you see it, click on that. The object that we want to collide with is our player, and click OK. Add an action, find our player, and this time we want to search for position. The X position is going to be hide player start.x, and the Y position, you guessed it, will be hide player start.y. Click OK on that, and let's do a quick play test to make sure it's working. The player start works as expected, and if we dive in the water and touch the red danger zone line, we're going to start over at the player start. Perfect. That is all working. Now let's go ahead and add a new event, add a new condition, start typing the word beginning and click on beginning of the scene. Click OK. Let's add an action. Let's select the hide group and we want to choose the action of hide. Go ahead and click OK. Another quick play test, and that is all working as expected. Add a new event, new condition, select our player, and then search for collision. The object will be the water top. Let's go ahead and add an action for the player, and the action will be to change the animation by name. Select the dead animation and then click OK. Add a new action, and this time we're going to search for object timer. The object will be our player. The timer name is created by us and must be in double quotes. So let's go ahead and name this player restart and click OK. Add a new event, a new condition, and we want the value of an object timer. The timer name we just created is going to be player restart. Let's go ahead and set that to greater than 1 second, maybe 1.5. I'll test that out and see what it looks like, and then go ahead and hit OK. Let's move down the condition for the player position, and we'll also want to move down the collision action. And for some reason, the object box is blank, so I'm going to go ahead and add the player back in. I'm going to set the timer to 1 second, and then let's add a new condition. Let's search for A-N-D, and now we're going to move the two conditions down, and then I'm going to change that timer value again to 0.5. Quick play test, and it looks like it's working, but I'm going to have to fix that animation on the respawn. Let's go ahead and copy the animation action down and use the drop down to select idle, and we'll test that quickly again, and perfect, it's working. I'm going to clean up and remove that blank event. Another quick play test to the top, and this time I'm going to dive off the right side and see how it looks. And okay, I need to extend the water. To be safe, I'll do it on both sides just to make sure we don't accidentally expose those edges. You can select each part while holding shift, and that'll let us resize all three at the same time. I'm just going to extend the right and the left. Now I'm just going to go ahead and build out my scene a little bit more with some background objects. Pause the video and do the same. Resume when you're ready. I'm going to reset the Z order to all of my new objects to a 3 since my mountain uses a 1 or 2, and I want to make sure that I'm using a number that's high enough but also lower than the player value. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete my player so I can add it back in as an event. This is personal preference, you don't have to do this part, but I always like to do it. Let's head back over to the Events tab. Let's add a new action for the existing beginning of the scene. For the player, let's create an object. The X position will be the hide player start.x, and the Y position will be the hide player start.y. Leave this as base layer and click OK. On second thought, let's go ahead and separate the event to keep all of the player events together. Let's create a new event and copy down this at the beginning of the scene. Move the create player event down. Now add a new action. For the player, let's search for size. I'd sampled a few variations before settling on 45 for the width and 68 for the height. Quick play test to see how it looks compared to the environment, and it looks pretty good. I'm going to comment this out for a moment by pressing D because I want to add a hitbox and I need a quick visual of what that looks like. So I'm going to head back to the Scene tab. I want to drag a new copy of my player into the scene and quickly resize it by setting the width to 45. Because that lock is enabled, it'll automatically set the height for me. And I'm just going to drag this over to the player start. Click on Add a New Object, Sprite. Let's rename this to Hide Player Hitbox, and remember to copy that into the clipboard. Click on Create with Pascal, choose a color, select the bucket tool and fill that in. Paste in the name, click that resize button, and this time I want to resize the object to 20 by 20. Click that resize button and hit save. Let's go ahead and drag our player hitbox into the scene and overlay it with our player so we can see how it looks for size. That looks pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. This will be another object that I generate and line up using events. I'm going to hold on adding it to the hide group while I'm working through the events just to make sure it's in the correct place, and I'll want to see it while I do that. So let's go ahead over to the Events tab. Using the existing at the beginning of the scene, let's click Add an Action. For the player hitbox, let's go ahead and create an object. The X position is going to be the player.x and the Y will be the player.y. This will be on the base layer. Go ahead and click OK. Press Shift and A to create a new event. Leave the condition empty because we'll want to update this on every frame. Let's add an action for the player hitbox. Select Put Object Around Another. The object will be the player. The distance and angle I want to leave blank for now and hit OK. Quick playtest just to see where that lands. And now let's go ahead and try adding distance of 25 pixels. See what that looks like. And we'll want to set the angle to 90 degrees. Another quick playtest, and that is looking good. See what that looks like when it jumps on the gem, just to make sure it's touching the ground. All right, that looks good. Let's move this event down and press D to uncomment the player events. Back in the scene tab, let's go ahead and remove that test player, and we'll do another quick playtest to make sure that the player events are working as expected. Okay, good. So let's go ahead and add that player hitbox to the hide group. That should have worked, so let's go back and check events. All right, I see. So we can't hide events that don't exist, so let's move this down, and we'll get rid of this line now. I'm going to move the camera down as well so that we create our player first, and then everything else happens after that. Since both of these are happening on each frame, I'm just going to combine these two and get rid of the blank event. Now we'll do a quick playtest, and perfect. That fixes all of the issues so far. Let's add a new action and set the Z order of the player to 200 so that it's always in front. Now I'm going to take a few moments and clean up the event sheet since we have a few events. Let's go ahead and create a new group. We'll call it player. Now I want to nest all of the player events. I'm going to create a second group and we'll call it camera. Let's go ahead and move that camera event down. Let's go ahead and add a comment, and I'm just going to call this little section player collisions. I'm going to add another comment and we'll call it create player. This is going to be super helpful if you'd look at your game a year from now and want to expand or make any modifications. Let's add a new event and new condition for the player hitbox. Select collision, and the object that we'll be colliding with is the gem. Let's go ahead and click OK on that. Let's add an action for the gem and select animation by name. Select the unstable gem and click OK. Let's add a new group and we'll call this gems and nest this new event. Right click on the left edge of the event. In the menu that pops up, go to add and then add for each object. The object will be gems. Let's go ahead and move down the condition and the action. Click on the Scene tab and then double click on the gems. Let's go to the Behaviors tab, add a behavior, and we want the tween behavior. Go ahead and click Apply. Back in the Events tab, let's add a new action for the gem, and I want to tween the Y position. The gem identifier is created by us and must be in double quotes. So I'm going to call this gem build. For the position, I'm going to set this to gem.y plus 50. And easing, I want to do swing from 2, and duration will be 1 second. I do want to destroy the object when the tween finishes, and let's click OK. Let's go ahead and add a trigger once and do a quick play test to see what that looks like. Okay, it's all right, but I can do it better. So let's head back to the Scene tab, create a new object, sprite. Let's rename this as hide gem position, and remember to copy that name into the clipboard. Click on Create with Pascal. I'll need to resize this because I resized it on the last use. Set that to 64 by 64 and click the Resize button. Now let's go ahead and choose a color. Select the bucket tool and fill that in. Paste that name in and then click Save. Click on the Hide group and let's add this new Hide Gem position and click Apply. Drag the gem position into the scene and we'll be covering up each of the gems, but I'm going to leave it offset for a moment so I can make a quick note of the Z order, and then also I want to delete that gem behind before I move it into the final position. So I'm going to go ahead and do this for the rest of my gems on the screen. I'll meet you back here in a second. Back in the event sheet, let's right click and add a new for each object. Let's move this up so it's above the existing event, and then the object will be the hide gem position. Copy down this beginning of the scene for the condition, and let's create a new action. For the gem, we want to create an object. The X position is going to be the hide gem position.x, and the Y will be hide gem position.y. This will be on the base layer. Go ahead and click OK. Let's copy down this Z order event, change the object to the gem, and set the Z order to 10. Come down to the object gem events, add a new action for the gem, search for start or reset an object timer. The timer name is going to be created by us, and it must be in double quotes. So I'm going to call this gem build. Let's go ahead and add a new for each object, and the object will be the hide gem position. Create a new condition for the gem. Look for object timer, and the object is going to be the gem. The timer name will be gem build, and we want greater than or equal to 3 seconds. Click OK on that. Now let's add a new condition for the gem. Search for collision, and the object will be the hide gem position. Click OK. Highlight the event and click J to invert that, or you could always right-click and select invert. For the action, let's go ahead and copy the create gem and Z order events. We can copy down this trigger once as well. Here I spent a lot of time troubleshooting the failing object timer. It should have worked, and I'm running out of time, so I finally got it working by creating a scene timer. Let's go ahead and do that now. Here we want to delete the object timer. Let's create a new action. Search for timer and select the start or reset a scene timer. The timer name, I'm going to use gem rebuild in double quotes and click OK. Let's also delete this condition over here for the object timer and create a new condition. We're going to search for timer value and select the value of a scene timer. The timer name will be gem rebuild. We want to use greater than 3 seconds and click OK. Move that to the top and let's play test. Finally, it's working as expected. I spent a long time there, and I'll have to go back to figure out why that object timer didn't work as expected, but it works for now, so let's move on. Press Shift and A. Let's create a new event. Right above that, let's go ahead and create a new comment, and we're going to call this player animations. Create a new condition for the player. Look for is jumping. Let's add an action for the player. Search for animation and select animation by name, and we'll choose jump. Now we can duplicate this event. Press J to invert, and if the player is not jumping, let's create a new condition for the player, and we're going to check to see if the player is on the floor. Click OK on that. And now let's create another condition, and this time we're going to check to see if they're moving. And for this one, we'll want to invert that as well. Let's go ahead and switch the animation back to idle, and now we can move that event up. Press Shift and A, let's add a new event. We're going to copy down this floor check and press J to toggle the invert. Add a new condition, look for key pressed, and the key will be left arrow. Press OK, add a new action, and for the player, let's search for flip, and we want to flip horizontally. Let's go ahead and toggle this on to activate flipping. And now we can copy down this animation event and switch the animation to run. Now we can duplicate this entire line, switch the key to the right arrow, and toggle the flip horizontally to no. This is working, but the animation stops, so I'm going to head back to the Scene tab, double-click on my player, and open up the properties. Under Run, let's make sure to tick this loop. Quick play test, and that looks good. I'm going to go back into my player properties for a moment, click on the Behavior tab, and I want to add the tween behavior. Go ahead and click Apply and head back to the Events tab. I want to add an action for the player. Search for opacity, and then select the tween object opacity. The tween identifier is created by us and must be in double quotes. I'm going to call this player water. I'll tween the opacity to about 200 for now. I can always come back and adjust this later. Easing I'll leave as linear, and duration will be 1 second. Now let's add a quick level 2 placeholder. Click on the project properties. Under scenes, let's click this plus. I'll rename this to level 2, and then click on level 2 to open that scene. In scene 2, I want to add a new object. The object will be text. I'm going to rename this as TBC. And for the text to display, I want to type "to be continued." Kind of the way that the Back to the Future movies ended with the "to be continued." So if I have time, I'll come back and get a little fancier with the text, but that will do for now. I'm going to add in a few blank lines and then a "thanks for playing." If there's time, I definitely want to come back and work on building out a level 2 completely, and then we can adjust all of this as level 3, but we'll see how much time is left. Let's go ahead and drag this into the scene, and that will do it for now. So back in scene 1, let's go ahead and find that gem cluster, and we're going to drag that into our scene. I want to make sure that I have the Z order set to 5. Click on the Events tab, and under the Danger Collision, let's press Shift and A to add a new event. I'm going to create a new condition for the player and search for collision. The object will be the gem cluster. Now let's click OK. Let's add a new action and search for change the scene, and the scene that we're going to change to is level 2. Do a quick playtest, and I do want to make it all the way to the top to touch that cluster. While playtesting the switch scene, I found a bug on the landing. For some reason, my player kept falling through. I have these set to jump through because it's necessary since we're climbing up, but for some reason, the player keeps falling through. That's unexpected. Spent quite a bit of time here troubleshooting, only to find that the issue was the collision mask on the run and jump animations. So let's go ahead and fix that now. Let's double click on the player to go back to the properties. I want to click on the Edit Collision Masks. Idle looks good, but let's check the rest. Looks like jump has an issue, so I'm going to move these bottom points down, and I'll do the same thing for the rest. Bit more playtesting for bugs here, and looks like I reintroduced the tearing in the mountain while troubleshooting the last issue, so I'll go ahead and fix that again quickly. Now let's head to the summit. Looks like I fixed all of the issues, no more falling through the edges. It's looking like there's no good place on the top landing to put the gem cluster without making it so that the player could accidentally touch that and switch to level 2. So to fix that, I'm going to add a new landing off to the right. Look for platform or tile 14. Find a good spot where your player can jump to it from the top, and then make it so that the player can jump from the top but not another gem or another landing. I'm going to add in tile 16 for the right, and then fill in the rest with tile 15. Notice on tile 15 there's a bit of a white line bleeding from the bottom, so let's go ahead and resize that up until that goes away. I do want to make sure that the Y value for all 3 of our tiles is the same. And now let's go ahead and move that gem cluster over to our new platform. I want to have it on the far right because I want our player to have to jump over to the landing and then walk to the right. I'll eventually come back and make it so that the scenes fade out and in, but for now, I'm just going to let it snap to the new scene. You can also turn on the grid mask here and be sure to test to make sure that your player can make that jump. Make any final adjustments that you may need to in this section, and then resume the video when you're ready. Now I'm going to work on adjusting the camera for the opening scene. Let's go ahead and switch the camera from our player to Frosty and see what that looks like. It looks okay, but not quite what I'm going for. I could play around with offsetting, but it's going to be easier just to create a new object that I can move or adjust as necessary. Let's go ahead and click on Add a New Object, rename this as Hide Camera Opening, and remember to copy that into the clipboard. Click on Create with Pascal, select a color, switch to the bucket tool, and then fill that in. Paste in the name and then click Save. Now click Apply, and then we're going to add this to our hide group right away. So double click that, search for the new object, and then click Apply. Now we can drag our opening object into the scene, want it kind of above and to the right of the top mountain. Back in the Events tab, let's change our object to the opening object and see what that looks like. That's looking perfect. Now press Shift and A to create a new event. We want to copy this at the beginning of the scene for the condition, and then let's create a new action. Search for Camera X, and then select the Center Camera X position. The value is going to be lerp Camera Center X, comma, Player X, comma, and I want to start with a value of 0.5. We can always change that later. Leave the layer and the camera number as default, and then click OK. Add a new action. We're going to do the same thing with Y, so we want to search for center Y. Now the value is going to be lerp camera center Y, comma, player Y, comma, 0.5. Go ahead and click OK on that. We want to move this beginning of the scene event up. Now let's search for timer and select the start or reset a scene timer. The timer name is going to be opening scene. Don't forget those double quotes and then click OK. Click on add a new condition, search for scene timer, and then this time we want the value of a scene timer. The timer name is going to be opening scene. Select greater than, and the value is going to be 1. Let's see what that looks like. It does work, but it definitely snaps to the player too quickly. So let's add a 0 between the decimal and 5 here. Do another quick test. It's still a little fast. I'm going to add one more 0. Perfect. That's looking more like what I'm going for. My goal here is going to be to show the player the entire challenge before they start blindly climbing the mountain. Now, I like the idea of slowly panning down to the player, but then we need to have the focus of the camera back on the player once that completes. Let's go ahead and duplicate this entire event. Change the duration to 10 seconds here. I also want to change this back to 0.5 to see what it looks like. All right, 0.5 is still too fast. I'm going to add that 0 back in. Let's add an action, search for timer, and this time we want to delete a scene timer. Select the opening scene and then click OK. Now let's press Shift and A, and this time we want to nest this event, so just drag this over. All right, bring down the 2 camera events, and I want to leave the condition empty because we want it to update on every frame. Give that a quick play test. I'm going to change the scene timer to 11 here and give it one more play test. Running short on time, and that's looking pretty good. We can always come back and make modifications later, but for now, let's add some music. Scroll up to the top and add a new action. Search for play music. Select play a music file. Navigate to your MP3 or WAV, whatever you downloaded. I like to start the volume at about 50, and I'm going to leave the pitch as 1. We can always come back later and adjust these. If there's time, I'd like to create an option that will be adjustable by the individual player. Let's add a new action. Search for preload. Select preload a music file. Select your song that you just uploaded and hit OK. In case you added a song more than once or more than one song, make sure that you're choosing the correct file name. In my case, I'll have to quickly adjust this so that the 2 versions match. Later, I'll come back and remove any unused resources. I want to move this preload to the very top event. On second thought, let me just go ahead and create a quick group for game configuration events. Let's go ahead, add that group, add an event. I want to copy up this beginning of the scene. Now I'm going to copy up the preload and music events. Let's go ahead and add a new action to hide the mouse cursor. I'm going to add another action, and this will allow full screen. Give that a quick play test to make sure everything is working as expected. I'm going to add a quick comment so I don't forget to add a key press so that users can skip the intro if they're playing more than once. Back in the Scene tab, let's go ahead and add a new text object. I'm going to rename this to train_water. For the text, I'm just going to type out avoid falling into the water. Click on the Behavior tab and add a tween, then click Apply. Center the text and change the font to white. Let's go ahead and drag that into our scene. I want to repeat this for platforms, so go ahead, add a new object. We're going to call it Train Platforms. For the text, I'm just going to type out you can rest easy on platforms. And this will let my players know that the ground won't fall out from beneath them. Go ahead and drag that into the scene. And I realized just now I forgot to change the font color and center it at the text, so let's go back in and fix that now. I want to repeat this one more time for the gem object. Let's go ahead and rename that as Train Gems. Set the font color to white and center that text so we don't forget later. For the text, I want to type out you can hang from gems, but they quickly become unstable when heavy objects land on top. That's a bit long. I'm not sure how I like it, but I could always go back and change it later. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and drag that into my scene. I only have about 30 minutes left, and that includes uploading it to itch, so I need to hurry. I want to add a new object, sprite. Let's rename this as hide train water. I'm going to copy that text into the clipboard. Click Create with Pascal. Select a color. Let's switch the bucket tool and fill that in. Paste the name in, and then click Save, and then click Apply. Let's double click and add our new hide object. Go ahead and click Apply. Let's go ahead and drag that into our scene. We'll make an adjustment so we know that our player will touch it. Let's add another new object, sprite. Rename this as train gems, and then copy that name into the clipboard. Same thing, we're going to create with Pascal, select a color, switch to the bucket tool, and fill that in. Let's paste that name, and then click Save, and then Apply. Add our new hide object. Go ahead and click Apply. Drag that into our scene. I want to add a new object, sprite. Let's rename this as hide train platforms. I'm going to copy that text into the clipboard. Click Create with Pascal. Select a color. Let's switch the bucket tool and fill that in. Paste the name in, and then click Save, and then click Apply. Drag that into our scene. Now we'll head back to the Events tab. Click on Add a New Event. Let's copy down this at the beginning of the scene. Create an action, and for the train water object, I want to tween the opacity, and we're going to set that to 0, and then click OK. Then go ahead and copy that and paste it 2 times, so we have 3 total events. Change the second line to train gems, and the third to train platform. This will ensure that all 3 of our objects start as hidden. Let's go ahead and press Shift A to create a new event. I'm going to start typing train. And then for the train water object, we're going to search for collision. The collision object will be the player, and press OK. Let's go ahead and create a new action for the train water object. We want to tween the opacity. The name in the tween identifier, we'll create it as train water show. Don't forget your double quotes. Set the opacity to 255. Easing will be linear, and the duration is going to be 3. We do want to destroy the tween after it runs, so toggle this to yes and press OK. Press Shift and A, create a new event. Let's go ahead and copy down the condition and then change the object to hide train gems. Copy down the action. Let's go ahead and copy down the event again. This time we're going to change the opacity to 0 and then rename this as train water hide and change the object to train gems. Rename this as train gems show. Press Shift and A to create a new event. Copy down the condition and change the object to hide train platform. Copy down the actions. For the first set, let's change the object to train platforms, and we're going to rename this as train platform show. For the second, let's go ahead and change the object to train gems and rename this to train gems hide. Press Shift and A to create a new event, add a new condition, and search for train platforms. When the tween has finished playing, and the tween identifier in this case is going to be train platform show, go ahead and click OK on that. Copy down this event and change the object to train platforms. Let's rename this to train platforms hide. Copy down a trigger once here and give it a quick play test. That is working as expected and will have to do because I'm officially out of time. The last step is just going to be to upload this to itch.io and start playtesting other people's games. That'll do it for this session. Be sure to click on the like and subscribe button, which supports my channel and lets me know that you like what I'm doing here. I've included links to my game in the description below. Feel free to give it a play and earn some gDevelop coin by leaving some feedback as I continue to develop version 2. I hope you enjoyed this session, and I'll see you next time.